with his music. And Jeff, for me, is one of those people that doesn't say too much, but whatever he says is profound. So you know that whatever is going to come out of his mouth is just what we need at that moment. So I'm really excited to hear Jeff give a whole talk, because it's probably going to be more words than I've ever had from him total in the whole about year and a half that I've known him. So Jeff is going to be giving a reading, The Summer Day by Mary Oliver, and then he is going to give his talk, which is All Who Wander Are Not Lost, or John Lennon's Life Happens While You're Busy Making Plans. So we're so lucky to have Jeff deliver this message. Let's everybody welcome Jeff Lovejoy. Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Bring it.
Thank you, Allie, for that. The summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? The grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So, happy December 8th, everybody. For those of you who have Catholicism in your background, today is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception.
Okay.
Do with that what you will. I want to take just a second. It's kind of funny, Allie saying that I don't speak very much. The people who know me very well would probably beg to differ. Once I get going, I don't shut up. Sally reminded me that many folks have moved on since the winter of 2016, which is the last time I talked. So just for the hell of it, how many people were here in February of 2016? Not too many. So she suggested a brief recap of my wandering. I grew up in central Massachusetts, was an altar boy, wanted to be a priest since I was the age of 4. In the 8th grade, there was a girl in my class who was a niece of the vocational director of the Blessed Sacrament Fathers. So he came to the house, talked, left brochures, and I was pretty much hooked. Mom wasn't very happy about my leaving home at 14, but I felt I'd found my home, and in some ways felt I was really starting my life. Dad had regrets only later, thinking the seminary had turned me into a liberal. I spent 4 years of high school and a year of college and entered novitiate, took my first vows, and meanwhile became the organist because the organist had left. And later a bass player for folk masses because I didn't want to get left out. Leaving was tough, the only thing I had imagined myself to be since I was 4, and by that time I was about 20 and really ready to begin my life. Within a year I was living in New York City. which was massive culture shock. But it was the golden age of rock, I think, so it was a great time to be there. I want to back up just a little bit to get to the point that why did I leave? There was one night I was walking down the road with Laddie, who was our mascot, and looking very much like Lassie. Excuse me a second, I gotta get some water.
I'll get you some, Jeff.
Yeah, I'll lay down right here.
I have it, I just don't have it where I need it.
I need to take this and turn that off.
So anyway, we were walking down the road. It was outside of a small town, probably about half the size of Florence, and I sat down on a rock and suddenly had this feeling that sort of looking at Creator through the wrong end of binoculars. And it was very sad and very terrifying, and I started to bawl my eyes out, and Laddie started howling, and the louder I cried, the louder Laddie howled, and if I could have looked at myself from someplace else, it probably would have been very funny at the time. Anyway, after that I walked back and I saw the Master of Novices was still up, so knocked on his door and I went in to see him and I tried to explain what had just happened. And he immediately got up and went to his bookshelf and he pulls out this big volume about like so, and he's leafing through pages and he says, I think that was what happened here on page 1167. And it kind of occurred to me at the time that nothing like that had ever happened to him. So that was kind of one of the last straws. I think I can talk about the day that I actually left a little easier in a poem. It's called Leaving Holy School, November 1967. And I didn't write this until 2001. Perhaps it was on a day much like this, overcast, clouds, without borders, the things I remember, so few that it happened. I am disappointed to have such a meager treasure chest of memories, my dad putting my bags in the trunk, the novices swarming around softly, the complete unreality of it as we pulled out of the long driveway, black cassocks and waving, doing something I had to do, yet having no clue as to what was coming. At the age of 4, I had decided that I would serve my God, that three-headed persona whom I was so bloody cocksure of that the woman who had once asked me why we Catholics thought we were the only ones who were right got my smug and stupid reply, it's because we are. An answer such as that doesn't leave much room for dialogue, and yet here I was, leaving it all on a day that still stands as a puzzling discontinuity in my now less puzzling stream of days, nights, and assorted dreams and fantasies. A girl, the trigger for my leaving. Her beauty, her poems, a song sirening from an island I'd yet to glimpse, but oh, there would be time for that, and there was, and there was, and there was. But she is gone, long gone. There were 2 days, really, that seemed to point to this oddest of mornings. One while sitting on a therapist's couch, my ears having strained for weeks to hear some pearl of wisdom I might use, instead hearing myself say, I think I need to leave the seminary. And he, as if on cue and playing his part perfectly, uttered his one line, I think you're right, and at once sank back into some company of strangers while I, something large crumbling inside, worked my way into a sleepwalk that would last years. If I was not to be a priest, then what in the world would I be? The second was a panicked phone call to get the girl's number, only after my having drunk the dregs of an entire bottle of wine, a young novice, he from New York of course, had hidden in a boot in his closet, perhaps just for that occasion. Closely followed a job, the draft, a place to live, the tangles with parents' cares and wishes and meddling, and a descent into some murky hell where the other folks lived who were not so sure of why God made us, or who was God, or what was this image and likeness thing that boldly adorned the pages of the Baltimore Catechism number 3, the sort of sayings of Chairman Mao for Catholics. And I felt liquor slide down my throat, inhaled the mysteries of marijuana and the much greater mysteries of women, a mixture, to be sure, of the joyful, the sorrowful, and the glorious mysteries, mixed in with our fathers and Hail Marys and glory bees, and fears, crippling fears, that I would be thrown headlong into the chasms of the deepest hells as soon as I might allow my eyes to close upon the pillow on any particular night. And then it was the day the music lived, and so I sang my joys, my sorrows, my confusions to the gods of beauty and terrible transcendence. And I sang to the masses, those lowly, inferior masses who I had been so well above until that so gray day in November. So this is a whole sort of list of gratefulness. There are two priests, or maybe it was the same priest, I don't know, who changed my life in pretty significant ways. The first was when I was in the college part. I was still in Hyde Park, and this priest invited Dorothy Day to speak to us. I don't know if you know much about Dorothy Day, but she was head of the Catholic Worker Movement and also a pacifist. And so even though at the time I thought there's no way in hell I'm ever leaving here, it kind of planted the seed. And so as soon as I left, I started going for conscientious objector status. The other priest was had this great idea. There was a girls' school down the road from us when I was in Barrie, and it was actually a lot stricter than our seminary was. But anyway, some priest got the bright idea that, hey, why don't we have a holy hour and we'll invite the girls up and we'll have coffee and donuts afterwards. And that's when I met the girl, and that was the last straw. Influences and much gratefulness to Joseph Campbell, who kind of filled in for a lot of. There was a pretty long period, I guess, when I was doing the John Lennon thing of throwing things overboard, and then it left a very big hole to fill, and Joseph Campbell really helped with that. How many have seen Field of Dreams at least once? That is Campbell's hero's journey, is you can lay Field of Dreams on top of it. Whoops. Fits rather perfectly. Jane Roberts and Seth. I've had some people just sort of come out of the woodwork. I was living in a rooming house in the mid-70s, and I started talking with this guy about metaphysical stuff, and he hands me this book, Seth Speaks, and now I have a whole shelf of Seth books. Michael Newton, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. My big takeaway from that was pretty large. It's you just don't want to be judging anybody because you have no idea what kind of path they're traveling and what kind of challenges they've signed up for in this life. And similarly, Robert Schwartz with A Soul's Plan and A Soul's Journey. Again, that was lent to me by somebody here. And the Michael Newton book was lent to me by somebody who's no longer with us, moved up north. But it's amazing to me, this, you know what they say, when you're ready, the teacher appears. And so I don't believe in coincidences. And finally, there was somebody also here who introduced me to Dolores Cannon. And I mentioned the Baltimore Catechism before. I remember the teachers telling us about, God is all powerful, God is everywhere, God is this, God is that. But not then, not at any time in the seminary, did I ever hear anybody talk about God being all imaginative. And that's what Dolores brought to the table for me. There are things that if I had not read those other books, I think would have seemed impossible, the things she talked about. And that sort of echoes the old George Bernard Shaw thing that Robert Kennedy used to quote, "Dad, not the son." Some people see things as they are and ask why. I see things that never were and ask why not. And Einstein weighed in the same vein. I only ran across this a couple of months ago. The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. So, a big thanks to all the people who have brought those books to me and changed my life in pretty dramatic ways. And I also want to thank the priests and the nuns, even though I don't believe the way they do anymore. Their care, their devotion, their worry for us in the seminary and when I was in grade school as well, left a lasting imprint, and that's pretty important. And then there were the animals. Since I met Sarah, we've had 5 dogs, 4 cats, 3 rats, a rabbit, and a guinea pig. And the dog we had when I first moved in with her was Jenny, and I always give her credit for opening my heart. When I moved in, Jenny was a little poodle, and there was Jenny and the cat, and I wouldn't allow any of them in the bedroom. And I remember Jenny being outside the door, foofing, trying to get in, I just wish I had done differently. But after that, we finally wound up with Benji, and of course Benji was on the bed with us every night. And I couldn't get to sleep usually until he was there. And finally there was Weister, who I think has taught me gentleness and patience. And that was only a little over 6 months ago that he left us. I'd like to quote a thing by Rumi. He wrote, "Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom." I want to say a word about prayer. I've been going back and forth with a friend on Facebook who never tires of saying that, well, prayer is fine, but then there must be action. And I argue that deeply intentioned prayer is action. And it seems that many in various Power of 8 groups agree. It was just a couple nights ago, I was watching somebody's account of a near-death experience, and she was led by her guide to actual see streams of prayer. And there's a lot to that. I wish I had the link for you, because it was pretty moving. I'm reminded of Dennis last week was quoting Thomas Merton, saying that Americans have made a fetish of action. I very much agree. There's still a lot of Calvinism in the American soul. Idleness is the devil's workshop, and so on and so forth. Another Rumi quote that I try to live by: "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." And always makes me think of the 60s. We were pretty strident back then. I always like to joke that I could fall out of bed and roll into a protest march. But like I say, we were very strident. We were always looking at somebody else as the problem rather than ourselves, and maybe that's why the energy didn't last. Rumi yet again, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Oliver Wendell Holmes, man's mind stretched to a new idea never goes back to its original dimension. Sarah and I were blessed enough to be in a production of Our Town when we were in Maine. And I've always carried these couple of lines with me. Emily, the main character, asks, does anyone realize life while they're living it every minute? And the narrator says, no, the saints and poets maybe, they do some. In that vein, one of my favorite people, A.A. Milne, from Winnie the Pooh, rivers know this, there is no hurry, we shall all get there someday. And just before my song, I would like to end up with another Merton quote. There are times when in order to keep ourselves in existence at all, we simply have to sit back a while and do nothing. And for a man or a woman who has let themselves be drawn completely out of themselves by their activity, nothing is more difficult than to sit still and rest.